Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 615. Today we're going to take a look at a game called Heaven and Ale. Now, this is currently being published by Eggertspiel, but it's going to be brought over to the United States by Plan B Games, and they've done Azul and Century Spice Road. This is designed by Michael Kiesling and Andreas Schmidt, so it's a co-design effort, and it's a very wonky, funky game to get into. On the surface, it's very mechanically driven. Like, when I first played it, I was like, there's no theme really at all here. I was still enjoying the game. But then after I've played it now a couple times, the theme actually sort of comes through. It's a little bit of a stretch, but it's there. So, before I spoil too much of the review, let's jump into how it works, and then I'll come back and tell you what I think. Okay, so here you can see the game set up for 3 players. There's a couple things to take note of at first. You've got your main board here. This is where you're going to be moving your pawns along, taking different action, collecting these different tiles and stuff like that. And then down here you have each player's personal board, and you can see I've got some extras here. Now this is just for the blue player, and these are identical. And the other thing you're going to get to start the game is $25 starting money, and then everybody gets an identical set of these little bonus cards, which you can cash in at various points during the game, or if you choose, you can actually kind of discard them for an extra $3 if you're kind of low on income. So first off, let's take a look at the player board. And the idea behind the game is you have kind of a farm type of activity, and you are hiring these different monks and workers to help you out on your plot of land, and then you're trying to drive up these little tokens here for these different resources. Now these are going to start off on these spaces. It might be a little bit difficult to tell, but you can see kind of in the background here for the wheat, that's where the yellow one starts. For the water here, where the blue one is, that goes there. Green starts there, white, and then brown way up here. And you're trying to kind of drive all of these up on this track. That's going to help your end game scoring. And then you've also got here your brewmaster, and you're also trying to drive them up. So based on kind of what you do on your different plots of land here is going to affect that. Now the other thing to notice here is we have these shed locations like so, and that's a way that's going to kind of trigger all of the spaces or some of the spaces around it. And then you have a light and a dark side. So it's going to cost you more money to put out resources on the light side than the dark side. The dark side is going to generate extra money for you, and then the light side is what's going to be effective in generating, kind of improving your overall different resource tokens here. So I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. But that's kind of the gist of what you're doing there. So here's the main game board. This is where you're going to take all your actions. It looks like a little bit of a mess now that I'm looking at it on camera, but it's not too bad. Couple things to note here. You have here your little workers or monks, and this is set up differently based on the number of players. You can see you've got like age 1 and age 2. Since we're doing 3-player, we're not going to have these stacks here. These are going to be removed out of the game. So it's a little bit random in terms of the end game quantity of the different types of these workers, and you can see there's different faces on them here, and this has some implication how you're actually going to score different things like that. But so these are basically kind of, just think of these as like different types of workers based on the picture there. And then you've got, of course, different tiles representing those different goods of those cylinders that I showed you that you're going to move up on the different tracks here. So of course I showed you wood. You've got here, this is a wood token, and then you've got this white one, whatever that is. And then you have, you know, the little water here and all that kind of thing. So you're going to be collecting those as well as also going on the various different scoring spots, and that's these little purple discs. So as you kind of hop around here, and this is really probably the most interesting part of the game, or the most difficult part of the game in terms of where you're going to go, is knowing when to land on these spots here. And you'll take these tokens, and there's a little spot on your board where you'll place them, and you'll score in these various different ways throughout the course of the game. That's either going to generate money or increase kind of your production in terms of the different resources and stuff like that. You've also got these barrels here, which are bonus points, which I'll explain a little bit later. But first, let's look at the starting spot. So you're randomly going to choose a start player, and since we're playing blue, we'll say they're the start player. So they're going to go in this number 1 spot right there. And then going counterclockwise, each other player is going to choose a bonus that they get, because play just goes clockwise. And so let's say the red player was next. He would maybe go here. That would advance his brewmaster 1 space on the track. He might go here. That would advance a single resource 2 spots, or maybe he'll go here for a little bit extra money. So we'll go there, and then they'll get a little bit of a bonus, and you'll get that bonus depending on how you kind of end each round. So there's really 4 actions that you can do in the game, but the way that the action choice is broken up is by this track here. So the first thing we can see is 3 of the different actions. You can see you can get one of these resources, that's a type of action. You can get a monk, that's a type of action. You can score, and that's a type of action. So those are the 3 kind of main actions. And then there's also an action you can sort of see over here, this kind of empty wooden spot. And that's an area where you'll be able to score 1 or more of these barrels. So those are the 4 basic actions that you can do. You can get resources, you can get monks, you can score, or you can try to score some bonus barrels. That's it. Now all the tricky part and the decision making comes in and how far you kind of move along the track and so on. So let's look at how the actions work. So let's say blue wanted to go here and they want to just pick up this tile. Now sometimes in later rounds of the game there may be more than 1 tile. So if everybody kind of skipped over that tile, you can never go backwards on the track, you can only go clockwise. If somebody skipped over that and everybody skipped over that and there was nothing there, then when you deal more out in the next round, you'll put another one there, and then you'll have the option of getting 1 or both of those. So let's say, just to keep it simple, we're going to go here and we want to collect this hops tile. Well, how do we know how much to pay for it? Well, it has a base value of 5, and if we choose to place it anywhere in our shaded side of the board, we just put it there and we'll have to pay that amount to the bank. If we want to put it in the light side, we're going to have to pay double whatever the face value is. So in this case, it would cost you 10. And the same goes for the monks. So blue is gone in this case, and then maybe yellow is going to jump up here. They're going to grab that monk, and you can kind of see it's upside down there, but that's a 4. And we have the same principle here. So in this case, this one costs 4. If we put it in the dark side, it's just 4. If we put it in the light side, again, it's double. So it's 4 times 2, which is 8. So depending on where you put it, it's going to cost you more or less. And again, stuff on the dark side is going to generate you money. Stuff on the light side is going to drive up these different resource tokens. But we'll get to that in a second. So those are kind of the first 2 actions. Now the next one is these different scoring tokens here, and there are various different spots on the board. You'll never have more than 1 scoring token, except maybe in the last round, depending on the player count, you actually will put 2 on some of these, and that varies based on the player count. You can just read the rules there. But typically, during the course of the game, there's just 1. So once somebody takes it, it's gone, and then so these are even a more sought after commodity even than the workers, which there are not very many of. There's plenty of resources, but there's not very many of, and there's a few more scoring tokens, but they're definitely very sought after to trigger income in a way. So there's various different spots on your board that you can score. Now based on where you picked up the scoring marker, it'll tell you where you can actually score. So there's 1 spot here that allows you to score a certain number. So let's just take a look here. We have this 5. And just for giggles, let's just put a couple more 5s out like that. So when we take the scoring marker and we put it there, then we're going to score all of a number. So we score all the 5s. So if we had a 4 here, that would be ignored. We'll say, okay, I've got a bunch of 5s. I'm going to score all of that. And then based on, again, where the tile is, you're going to get a certain amount of stuff. So here we would get this amount of money. So we get $5, $10. Now if we look over here, instead of money, since it's in the light side, we're actually going to bump up the matching color here up that many tracks. We're going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So based on where you put it, you're going to get that. And then the same goes for these other resource spots here. So let's say we did another scoring here, and we got to a spot that allows us to put it on a good spot. So here, instead of scoring all the 5s, we're going to score all the white tiles. So in this case, we would get $4 because it's in the dark side, and then we would move this up here again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots. And finally, the last type of scoring is you're going to score a particular type of monk. So we've got this fella here, and then we would put that there. Now, if we had multiples of this type here, we would score all of them. In this case, we just have the 1, and it's going to score everything that is adjacent to it. So in this case, it's adjacent to this guy here, so that's going to go up $5. If that was there, of course, we would score another 5 on the track, and so on. Now, if it's adjacent to another monk, let's just put this guy here, then you're going to trigger that monk, and then he's actually just going to bump up your brewmaster 1 space. So again, if you trigger another adjacent monk, you're just going to move the brewmaster up 1 space like that, and that's very important to do. So those are your 3 main actions in the game. I'll talk about the barrel action in just a second. Now the other thing that you're trying to keep in mind as you put these out, you notice that you don't put any of these tokens in any of these shed spaces. What you're trying to do is actually surround them. And once you do that, immediately on your turn, once you do that, you're going to then trigger a little bonus here. So the first thing you're going to look at is you're going to total up all of the numbers surrounding it. In this case, we've got 19 here. 15 plus 4 is 19. We'll take a look at this chart over here on our player board and say, okay, we've got 19. So that means we can move our Brewmaster up one space on the track here, because you can see that little icon there. And then now you can immediately place a shed kind of with a value of 3. Now you might say, okay, we're trying to always get the highest number. Well, not necessarily. If you get 0 to 7, so you get a bunch of low numbers, and again, if you get the monks, those are effectively 0 for this case. So in this case, we'll place a shed token with no value, but you get to move your Brewmaster up 6 spaces there. So that's very key again. But in our case, we got a value of 3, so we're going to find a token. You just have a pile of these off to the side, and these are double-sided with different values. See, it's blank on that side and 3 on this side. And then based on the value here, you're going to then reactivate all of the tiles around it based on this little thing here. So what this tells you is activate 3 non-adjacent tiles. So in this case, I maybe would do these 3, the 5, the 4, and then the 5. So that would give me, again, $9 because these are both in the shaded area. And then again, I'd move white up 5 spots. What you really want to do though, just a little tip, is have monks positioned in such a way based on how you're going to score. So if I scored this monk, and then that, I would get my $5, and then I'd activate the monks, who again would then activate these 2, and then he would activate, and he'd activate these 2, and then, you know, whatever else might be adjacent to them on the outlying area. So that's a way to kind of get, you know, double use out of all these tiles that you've been placing. And then as you place them, of course, you're trying to snake around others and, you know, build up kind of combos and little interactions between all the tiles here in all these different spaces. So those are kind of the 4 ways to score. You've got the 3 ways to score here, here, and here. And then again, once you surround a spot, you kind of effectively score them again. Now, when you score though, when you take these purple tokens, let's look at something else that you can do. And it's also worth noting here that once you score these, you're done with that for the game. So for example, we have the X spot here. Once you score that and you pick like all the 5s, maybe later on in the game you've got like 7 3s. Well, you already scored your quote unquote number scoring, so you're done with that. And if you score wood early, then you're not going to score wood again. You've got to kind of work that in. That can be very tricky. Well, let's just move this down here and say effectively I scored the hops, then I scored the white stuff there, and then once you have a little pair, you can kind of see these little groupings with these black borders. You can choose one of your cards and then score an immediate bonus. So I could just place that card down, immediately get $12. I could place this one instead. I can move my Brewmaster up 5 spots. Or I could place this one. That means I could take my furthest behind token here and then move it up the track a number of spaces equal to this amount of purple tokens that I have here, and so on. And then again, anytime on your turn, maybe you get in a situation where like, I'm not really ever going to score that one, it's not going to work out that well for me. You can discard a card just to kind of throw it down face down, and then you'll just get $3. You can just do that on your turn whenever, and that'll maybe give you some extra money. Because again, it does get pretty expensive over here to start putting, you know, higher value tiles out in the light space, because it does cost you double. And maybe again, later rounds, you might have 2 tiles on a single spot that you want access to. That's going to cost you a boatload of money. So don't be afraid necessarily to get rid of, you know, one of those or maybe 1 or 2 of those for some extra money. Now the last spot to talk about here are these Beryl Spots. So once you move to here, then at that point you can sort of cash in bonuses for as many of these quote unquote goals that you have fulfilled. And so let's look at these. These are actually in stacks. So you can see we've got like a big one and a little one there. And now the big ones here, those are worth 4 points at the end of the game. And then the little ones here are worth 2 points at the end of the game, but it's the same goal. Once you get, of course, the big one, you can't get the little one again. But once you go here, let's say, for example, at this time, I had 3 of my cards played. So I could take that one. And then I had, let's say, all of the light side spaces on my board filled up, all 15 of those. And let's say I had scored all of the various different monks that are in the game. I did that all when I moved to this spot here. Then I can score all 3 of those. You just take those. So you're kind of passing in effect, and then you're letting other people move around and get stuff you might want, but you might also be in a kind of a race to get some of these different barrels that multiple people are going after. Now once you kind of move around the board, again, you can't go counterclockwise. You've got to keep going clockwise till you hit the end. Then the first player in here, they get their pick of a bonus. So they could choose to go first on the next round, and that might be valuable. If it's the last round of the game, that gives you 1 victory point at the end. You may choose to go to these other bonuses, move up the tokens for the resources, you get $2, move your Brewmaster up. Now, if other 2 people have gone here and you're the last person to come in, you have to take the #1 spot. So that's the game. Now, all the points that you got during the game from the barrels, that's great. But this is where you're going to get all your points. This kind of very wonky end game scoring, and I'm going to show that to you now. Okay, so you've spent the whole game moving up the various resource tokens. You've moved up your brewmaster. Now you're going to figure out kind of your big boatload of points that you're going to get. Well, the first thing you're going to do is look at where your brewmaster is. And you can see he's kind of in this little range here. There's a couple things to notice. You've got 3 to 1, and then you've got a multiplier 4. In this case, you're looking at the 3 to 1. And what you're trying to do now is you're going to squish all your resources together. So, since I'm doing 3 to 1, I go 1, 2, 3. I spend my highest resource, and I can move this up 1. And I'm going to move both of these back, so 1, 2, 3, which I've moved 6 back because I did both of them. So I can move this up and then this up. We'll do it again. 1, 2, 3. Move these 2 up, and then let's see, 1, 2, 3. And this will go up and this will go up, and you can't really spend anymore because you got them as close as you possibly can. So this is in a 7 here. So we're going to take now this 7 here. This is your lowest token, and you're going to multiply it by the multiplier where the brewmaster was, so 4. So 7 times 4 in that case, it would be 28. Now you can also spend just $10, so it's good to have some extra money to move a token up. So you can, after you do this little squishy thing where you spend the ratio and move the other one up, then you can spend $10 per space and move them up. So in this case, I would get 28 plus, let's see, this would be another 12, so it'd be 40 points total with the barrels. And that's how you play the game. Okay, so that is a Heaven and Ale. And before I get into what I think of it, I want to tell you about how the game was presented to me so you can kind of see the evolution of my thought as I played the game. So locally, there's a convention over near Seattle. I'm about 4 or 5 hours away. And they go and get all the new Essen games. I go about every other year. And a bunch of my friends from here, they go over and play, and they play a ton of games, all the new releases. And Heaven and Ale was pretty much universally like the #1 game out of my friends. If not the #1, it was like at the top of everybody's list of favorite games that they played, and kind of on the most lists and everything. So I was really excited about it, and I had a sort of vague understanding of how it worked before I'd played it and read the rules and all that. And so I had super high expectations. And then in my first game, I was like, this is good, but it's not really that good. It's just kind of mechanics, and you're just kind of moving the guy around. You grab this, okay, you activate that. This side gives you money. This side moves your resources up. Okay, you go to score it and all that stuff. There's no theme, you know, you're just kind of, I don't know, guys blindly moving your guy around, just getting stuff and getting money and moving up the point track and all that kind of stuff. But then, as I played it more, and I've only played it 2 and 3 player, I haven't played a 4 player, but I'm sure it's great at 4 player, spoiler. But then as I played it more, it really kind of came through in the terms of how the theme worked, because you start with nothing on your farm, and then you add these little tokens. You kind of invest in these different resources, and you start little crops and wells and things like that, and kind of get the resources moving along. And you put some spot in money, so maybe you're selling your hops to start off, you're hiring new workers, they're kind of reinvigorating your resources, and you're getting more out of the land and all that stuff. And then you have this brewmaster, because the thing is called Heaven and Ale, so it's like, you know, where am I going to be making brew? You don't until the very end of the game. So you've moved those resources up, you kind of trained your brewmaster, he's been meditating on the new recipe that he's going to create this great craft beer in medieval times. And then at the end, you kind of see how well you did. And that kind of really does kind of evoke the theme of it. You start with kind of a nothing farm, you're kind of scraping by using which resources you can get a hold of and exploit. And then in the meanwhile, you have this longer term goal of, you know, creating a farm that you can make beer out of. And so that's really neat in terms of the theme. So that really does actually kind of come across very well, I think. And I was kind of surprised at that. And in terms of kind of how it works strategically and mechanically, the thing that's really sort of struck me about this game, it's got me really liking it, is it seems like it's sort of like a Glenmore or a Thebes kind of thing, where you move up the track and then there's sort of a time element. But it doesn't really work like that, because the person that's in the back doesn't get to keep going like in those games. It's just, you just take turns. And that was one of the other things that was kind of off-putting. I'm like, where's the rhyme or reason here? Well, there is a lot, because you're really, once you learn the game and kind of play and see what people are going for and what you can you need to take. Because if Billy, you go, oh, they're really trying to build a low value shed area, so I really need another yellow or something here. And so you know to take this versus when you take that stuff. So once you start to sort of interact a little bit more with the players, once everybody kind of understands the pacing of how far to move, you know, maybe do I jump to a scoring, do I jump to a barrel spot, all that kind of stuff, and then how that end game kind of really ends up playing out, then it becomes a lot more interactive in terms of taking stuff from other players or making sure that you've got to get to this spot. You know, this other one, if you can get to both spots, great, but you know, you've got to weigh the chances that somebody's going to take that out from underneath you. And so for that reason, this is why I bring up player count, is because I haven't played with 4, but I feel like there's going to be a little bit more of that, because you can kind of see what players might be doing and stuff. In a 2-player game, it's a little bit more static, but I don't want to oversell that. It still plays fine at 2, because there's the same amount of stuff on the board that you can get, but you play less rounds, because you know, at that point you can kind of more trickle it out. You can, ding, 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 you can just grab all the stuff, because you're only going to play a couple of rounds versus you play 6 rounds with 4 players. But with 4 players, all that stuff's going to get gobbled up very quickly. Okay, so yeah, so all of that kind of pacing and racing stuff is really neat. Now I've seen, and I don't usually see this in games, and I think this is okay. Now I've always scored right around in the kind of the 50s, so that's fine, but I've seen people score almost 80, and I've seen people score like 5. Now you might say, well, that was their first play. Well, no, the time that the person scored 5, that was their second game. The other thing this is hard to verbalize, but there are like kind of different strategies that you can take to approach the game. You know, you might think, obviously, okay, I'm going to put some in the money side and the dark side, and then kind of tack over to the light side. So I've got money coming in, so I can buy more stuff, and then I can get, you know, start to worry about moving those up the track. Yeah, generally that's a good idea, but there's a little bit of like opportunity tactics and stuff involved in there, which may shift you kind of out of your set plan. Of course, people are going to take tiles that you want. The other thing is in terms of how you move up the brewmaster and those tokens, because the brewmaster is very important, because he's going to give you that better ratio as it moves up the track to squinch up those stragglers there, because you don't want to have any low-hanging stragglers. You want to move them up as far as you can, but you really want to get the brewmaster up, because that's your multiplier as well at the end. And it's, I don't know if it's the hardest thing to do, but it seems like that's sort of it can become kind of an afterthought, and then halfway through the game, you're like, oh wait, I need to worry about the brewmaster. But you can like leave him hanging out and then really drill down and focus on him at the end of the game. Or you can just kind of move stuff up gradually and just kind of play a little bit more loosey-goosey. So there is some kind of general approaches to the game, and that's hard to like really verbalize it in a way I think that will be like understandable unless you've played the game. But it is there, so it's really cool. And then you have, of course, the different bonus tiles, and that's something else to consider about where you're positioning things and which areas you're filling up, which other things you're like, oh, if I get this, yeah, it's only this little bit of value, but it's going to give me the little extra thing to get the bonus barrel. And 4 points is not anything really to sneeze about. So yeah, that's kind of the game. It's very abstract in a lot of ways, but through that abstraction, I think, you know, the general theme and vibe, at least, of a farm and kind of building your farm towards the end goal is really cool. So that's very interesting. So that it has a little bit of that arc, that kind of arc of the game of like, oh, you kind of scraping along, and then at the end you kind of really, hopefully, are like pumping in and triggering some big moves there at the end of the game. But I definitely recommend this. Now, this review's a little bit early. They sent it to me, and I thought it was coming out about now, but it looks like maybe it's very end of December. This is coming out December 17, but may not come out until Q1. Seems like a lot of these Essen games, they kind of hit. It drives me crazy, because I'm like, what's the game of the year? Da, da, da. And they're like, well, it was released in October, and I'm like, I haven't seen it. So it doesn't count as a 2017 release. So anyway, this would certainly be in my top of 17, but like I'm a half a mind, if I make a list, whatever, I might as well leave it off because nobody can get it. So what's the point? Yeah, but this is great. So when and if it doesn't come out either this year, early next year, definitely take a look at it, give it a shot. I think definitely Euro folks will love it, and that does have some theme there. So take a look. Thanks.